Skype was never just a phone call. For a while, it was the most trusted name on the internet. 500 million people, all built on a single promise. Nobody could listen in. Not a hacker, not a company, not a government with a warrant. The way it was built, they said, made eavesdropping impossible. That promise was a lie, and the people who ran Skype knew it was a lie while they were saying it. This is the story of software built by men running from the law, sold twice, wired quietly for surveillance, and switched off by the company that paid $8.5 billion to own it. It looks like a product that died. Look closer, and it was killed. So what actually happened? Before Skype, there was a crime the music industry wanted stopped. In 1999, a Swede named Niklas Zennström and his Danish partner Jonas Friis hired 3 Estonian programmers through a newspaper ad. Ahti Heinla, Preet Kasasalu, Jan Talan. What they built was Kaza, a network that let anyone download almost any song for free. It became one of the most downloaded programs on Earth because people were using it to steal. The lawsuits came fast. A Dutch court ordered them to stop or pay $40,000 a day. The American record and film industries sued too. In Australia, a court ruled it guilty of encouraging theft on a massive scale, and its owner paid $100 million to settle. Zennström and Friis spent years refusing to set foot in America, where the courts were waiting. And while the lawyers chased Kaza, the same men were already building the same trick into something new. In August 2003, they released Skype. Phone calls cost money because phone companies built enormous networks. Skype refused and turned its own users into the network. Your computer and millions of others became the machine, and the strongest became supernodes. You were paying the whole time in bandwidth you never knew you'd given away. That's why the calls were free. By the end of 2004, Skype was adding 80,000 users a day, while Zennström told anyone who'd listen the telephone was 100-year-old technology, and it was time for it to die. The world's biggest companies heard him, and one decided that if the telephone was going to die, it wanted to own the thing that killed it. In September 2005, eBay bought Skype for around $2.5 billion. eBay's boss, Meg Whitman, said communication was at the heart of buying and selling. It wasn't. The auctions and the calls never connected. And inside eBay, Skype just sat there, expensive and forgotten. By 2007, eBay admitted it had overpaid, erasing $1.5 billion off Skype's value. By 2009, it wanted out, lining up investors led by Silver Lake. The deal was nearly signed. Then one of the founders blew it apart. Because eBay had made a mistake so basic it's hard to believe. It had bought Skype without buying the one thing that made Skype work. When eBay bought Skype, it did not buy the engine. The peer-to-peer technology that ran the network still belonged to the founders through a company called Jolted. In 2009, the founders pulled the trigger. Jolted moved to cancel the license and sued, accusing Skype of misusing the code that kept it alive. In its own filing to regulators, eBay admitted that if Skype lost the right to that software, running the business would likely not be possible. The infringement, they claimed, was happening 6 times a second. They demanded $75 million for every day Skype stayed online. The men who built Skype were now trying to strangle their own creation rather than watch someone else profit. In November 2009, everyone backed down. Founders settled, took 14%, and handed over the code. Skype survived its own creators, and now it was the perfect thing to sell. One buyer was left, the biggest one. In May 2011, Microsoft bought Skype for $8.5 billion in cash, the largest acquisition in its history. Steve Ballmer called it a phenomenal product, loved by hundreds of millions, and put it under his own control. On the surface, the happy ending. Except this was the exact moment the listening began. And the timing should make the hair on your neck stand up. Go back to the promise. They can't tap you. It's impossible. In 2008, while eBay still owned it, a reporter asked Skype whether it could hand a call to the police. A spokeswoman said no. The way Skype was built, the company simply could not comply. Documents later leaked by Edward Snowden showed Skype was added to the NSA's surveillance program, PRISM, on the 6th of February, 2011. Read that date again. That's before Microsoft's purchase was even announced. The wiring had started under the old owners. Then, around 2012, Microsoft moved Skype's supernodes off users' computers and onto its own servers. Officially, this was about speed and reliability, and one former engineer insists the plan began before Microsoft arrived. Was that the only reason? Did moving the network onto Microsoft's own machines also make it easier to reach into a call? That question has never been fully answered. You decide. But this part is not in question. The Guardian reported in 2013, using leaked documents, that Microsoft worked with intelligence agencies, and that the Skype video the NSA could collect roughly tripled after a new capability went live in July 2012. And while all of that was happening, Skype's own executives were calling the eavesdropping reports inaccurate and accusing journalists of misleading users. There was even a secret internal program revealed by the New York Times, Project Chess, fewer than a dozen people working on how to make Skype calls available to law enforcement. It started around 2008, the same year the company swore listening in was impossible. So was Skype ever really yours? Or was the trust always the product and always a trick? The magic was gone, and people started leaving. The world moved to phones, and Skype, born on the desktop, never caught up. WhatsApp and FaceTime took mobile. Then Microsoft started wounding Skype itself. In 2017, it rebuilt the app to look like Snapchat, with a stories clone and graphics that made it worse. The reviews collapsed to a single star, and by 2018, Microsoft ripped it all back out. The redesign wasn't the real damage. Microsoft had fallen in love with something else. In 2017, it launched Teams, and that September declared Teams would replace Skype for business. The money moved, the engineers moved, and Skype became the old product. The one you keep alive, but stop feeding. And then came the single biggest opportunity in the history of video calling. Skype was perfectly placed to win it, so why didn't it? In early 2020, the world locked down, and overnight, video calling became how people stayed connected. This was Skype's moment, the thing it was built for. At the start of that year, it still led the market, and when lockdowns hit, its daily users jumped 70% in a single month. Microsoft walked past it. It pushed Teams instead and left Skype in the corner. Into that gap stepped a company nobody had heard of, Zoom. No account, no friction, just a link. Within a year, Zoom had nearly half the market, and Skype had fallen below 7%. The company that announced the death of the telephone missed the biggest phone call in human history, and it missed it on purpose because its owner was busy selling something else. On the 28th of February, 2025, Microsoft made it official. A short blog post said Skype would retire in May. No ceremony, a migration notice. On the 5th of May 2025, 22 years after that first release, Skype was switched off. At its peak, it had 300 million people a month. By the end, Microsoft would only admit to 36 million a day and refused to give a final number. Meanwhile, Teams, the product Skype was sacrificed for, had passed 320 million. So the product that promised to kill the telephone got a quiet prompt of its own. Log into Teams, bring your contacts. And the line went dead. So here's the question this whole story has been circling. Did Microsoft kill Skype? Technically, no. Microsoft will tell you Skype died the way old software dies. The world moved on, phones won, people stopped using it. All of that is true, but look at the pattern. A product whose entire promise was privacy, secretly building access for governments. A product perfectly built for the pandemic, deliberately left to rot while its owner pushed a different one. Maybe Skype was never the point. Maybe the moment Microsoft paid $8.5 billion, the calls and the trust stopped mattering, and the only thing that mattered was control. Control of who can listen. Control of the future, with Teams instead of Skype. Nobody can prove what was in those rooms. Microsoft never broke a single law that's been pinned to it, and the engineers swear it was about speed, not spying. So this is where it lands on you.